My wife's phone was buzzing with messages from another man. What I found wasn't just an affair. It was a decades-old secret that would shatter everything. I took his wife to Chicago's most exclusive gala, and what happened that night destroyed 4 lives forever. But the real twist, I discovered I had a son who would become my secret weapon. My name is William Franklin. I'm 44 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything a man could want. I built my life from nothing, clawing my way up from a working-class neighborhood in Detroit to become one of the most successful venture capitalists in Chicago. My portfolio was worth north of $50 million, and I had my fingers in everything from tech startups to medical device companies. Success wasn't just my profession, it was my identity. I met Autumn during a charity auction 12 years ago. She was 29 then, this stunning brunette with emerald eyes that seemed to hold secrets I wanted to spend a lifetime discovering. She worked as an event coordinator for high-end fundraisers, the kind of woman who could make millionaires feel comfortable while convincing them to open their wallets for worthy causes. When she laughed at my jokes that night, I knew I was done for. Our wedding was featured in Chicago Magazine. Autumn looked like a princess in her custom Vera Wang gown, and I felt like the luckiest man alive walking down that aisle in the historic Palmer House Hotel. We honeymooned in Tuscany, spent 2 weeks drinking wine and planning our future. She wanted to start her own event planning business, and I was more than happy to bankroll her dreams. For 11 years, everything seemed perfect. We lived in a restored Victorian mansion in Lincoln Park, the kind of place that made other successful couples envious. Autumn's business flourished, planning weddings and corporate events for Chicago's elite. We traveled to Europe twice a year, owned a cabin in Aspen, and hosted dinner parties that were the talk of our social circle. But perfection, I've learned, is just another word for delusion. The first sign something was wrong came last spring. Autumn started working later, taking calls in other rooms, smiling at her phone in ways that made my stomach tighten. When I asked about it, she'd wave me off with explanations about demanding clients and difficult vendors. I wanted to believe her because the alternative was unthinkable. Then came the changes in her routine. New workout classes that required special athletic wear. A sudden interest in lingerie that I never got to see her wear. Weekend conferences that seemed to multiply like rabbits. Each explanation was perfectly reasonable on its own, but together they formed a pattern I refused to acknowledge. The night I discovered the truth, I was supposed to be in San Francisco closing a deal with a biotechnology startup. But the meeting got moved to Monday, so I caught an earlier flight home, planning to surprise my wife with dinner at her favorite restaurant. Instead, I found her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. Theodore Thornfield. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Theodore Thornfield wasn't just any name. He was the CEO of Meridian Holdings, a real estate development company I'd actually considered investing in 2 years ago. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confident swagger that made him popular at country club events. He was also married to Megan, a woman I'd met several times at charity functions. A successful marriage, or so it seemed. I stared at that phone like it was a loaded gun. 3 missed calls in the past hour. My hands trembled as I picked it up, knowing I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. The message preview was visible without even unlocking the screen. Can't wait for tonight. Room 412 of the Renaissance, same as always. The water was still running upstairs. Autumn had no idea I was home. No idea her carefully constructed world was about to implode. I could have confronted her right then. Could have marched upstairs and demanded answers. But something cold and calculating settled in my chest instead. I'd built my fortune by gathering information before making moves, and this situation would be no different. I set the phone back exactly where I found it, and quietly made my way to my home office. My hands were steady now, muscle memory taking over as I opened my laptop and started making calls. The first was to Detective Raymond Cole, a private investigator I'd used for due diligence on potential investments. A former Chicago PD detective who specialized in corporate espionage and, when necessary, marital investigations. William Franklin speaking. I need you to look into something for me, and I need it done discreetly, I said when Cole answered. What's the situation? Cole asked, his voice professional and direct. I need surveillance on my wife. Full package. Where she goes, who she meets, how long this has been going on. There was a pause. Cole had done background checks on several of my business partners over the years, But this was different territory. Are you sure about this, William? Once we start down this road. I'm sure, I interrupted. How quickly can you start? Tonight, if you need it. I'll have someone at the Renaissance Hotel within the hour. The water stopped running upstairs. I could hear Autumn moving around in our bedroom, probably getting dressed for her evening with Theodore. My stomach churned with a mixture of rage and disbelief. 11 years of marriage, and she was throwing it away for what? Excitement? Validation from another man? Do it, I told Cole. And Raymond? I want everything. Photos, videos, financial records, communication logs. If she's been planning this behind my back, I want to know how deep it goes. I hung up and leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the family photo on my desk. Autumn and me at our 5th wedding anniversary party, her arms wrapped around my neck, both of us laughing at something someone had said. We looked happy. Hell, I thought we were happy. Footsteps on the stairs interrupted my thoughts. I quickly closed the laptop and grabbed a book from the shelf, settling back in my chair just as Autumn appeared in the doorway. She was dressed to kill, black dress that hugged her curves, heels that added 4 inches to her height, makeup applied with the precision of a woman who wanted to impress someone. Oh, Autumn said, placing her hand over her heart dramatically. You scared me. I thought you were in San Francisco. Meeting got moved to Monday. I replied, keeping my voice casual. You look beautiful. Special occasion. Autumn's smile faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. Client meeting. You know how demanding Mrs. Patterson can be about her daughter's wedding. I nodded, playing along with her lie. Of course. Well, don't let me keep you. I'll probably turn early anyway. She kissed my cheek, and for a split second, I caught a whiff of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Don't wait up, honey. This might run late. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at nothing. The house felt different now, like a stage set where I'd been playing a role without knowing it. Every shared meal, every conversation, every intimate moment. How much of it had been real? My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Cole. Target acquired. Renaissance Hotel, just like you said. We're in position. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and tried to focus on work emails, but the words blurred together. Around midnight, another text arrived. Got what you need. She's not coming home tonight. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on our back deck, nursing the bourbon and planning my next moves. By dawn, I'd made 3 decisions that would change everything. First, I called my attorney, David Sherman. We'd known each other since college, and he specialized in high-asset divorces for Chicago's elite. When I explained the situation, his voice turned serious. William, before we proceed, I need to ask, are you absolutely certain about this? Once we start the legal process, there's no going back. I'm certain, David. Draft the papers, but don't file them yet. I want to control the timing. Second, I liquidated several non-essential investments and moved the funds to accounts Autumn couldn't access. It was perfectly legal. The money had been mine before we married, but it would limit her options once the truth came out. Third, and most importantly, I started researching Theodore's wife, Megan. If they want to play games, I'd make sure everyone played by the same rules. Cole's report arrived by encrypted email that afternoon. The photos were devastating. Autumn and Theodore entering the hotel together, leaving separately in the morning, their body language intimate and familiar. But what interested me more was the timeline. Credit card records showed this had been going on for 8 months, not the few weeks I'd initially suspected. 8 months of lies. 8 months of her coming home to me, kissing me goodnight, and pretending our marriage meant something. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. That evening, Autumn returned home with flowers, expensive orchids that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. Sorry about last night, she said, arranging them in a crystal vase. Mrs. Patterson insisted on going over every detail twice. No problem, I replied, watching her performance with new eyes. How's the photography class going? You haven't mentioned it lately. For just a moment, confusion flickered across her face. She'd forgotten about that particular lie. Oh, it's fine. Just basic composition stuff. Pretty boring, actually. I nodded and smiled, letting her think she'd gotten away with it. But inside, my resolve hardened like steel. She wanted to play the loving wife while betraying everything we'd built together. Fine. But she was about to learn that I didn't play games. I won them. The next few weeks became an exercise in controlled fury. I maintained my normal routine: morning workouts, business meetings, evening dinners with Autumn, while Detective Cole's team documented every aspect of her double life. The evidence mounted like a prosecution case, each piece more damning than the last. Autumn had become careless in her confidence. She left her laptop unlocked more frequently, took calls in adjacent rooms rather than hiding completely, and even brought Theodore's gifts into our home. The diamond bracelet she claimed was a reward for landing a major client, purchased by Theodore 3 days before it appeared on her wrist. But the most interesting discovery came from Cole's investigation into Theodore himself. Meridian Holdings was hemorrhaging money, propped up by increasingly desperate financing deals. Theodore wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was stealing from his investors, using charm and connections to hide the fact that his company was essentially a Ponzi scheme. That's when I decided to meet Megan Thornfield. I orchestrated the encounter at a charity auction for the Chicago Children's Hospital, an event I knew both couples would attend. Autumn was working that night, legitimately, for once, coordinating the evening's logistics. Theodore would be there as a major donor, playing the role of successful businessman while his company crumbled behind the scenes. Megan arrived alone, explaining to everyone who asked that Theodore was dealing with a business emergency. She looked elegant in a navy blue gown, but I could see the strain around her eyes, the way she gripped her champagne glass a little too tightly. "Megan," I said, approaching her during the silent auction. "William Franklin. We've met a few times through various events." "Of course," she replied, her smile polite but genuine. "How's Autumn? I saw her earlier, making sure everything runs smoothly." "She's wonderful," I lied smoothly. "Listen, I hope this isn't too forward, but I've been considering some real estate investments. I know Theodore's company handles commercial development. Perhaps we could grab coffee sometime and discuss opportunities." Megan's expression shifted slightly. "I'm sure Theodore would love to talk business, but honestly, William, his schedule has been insane lately. Emergency meetings, last-minute trips. I barely see him anymore. There was the opening I needed." "That sounds familiar. Autumn's been working crazy hours, too. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a ghost." Megan laughed, but there was sadness in it. "Exactly. Theodore leaves early, comes home late, always on his phone. I'm starting to wonder if success is worth it when it costs you your marriage." We talked for another 20 minutes, two spouses lamenting their absent partners. But beneath the surface conversation, I was studying her, looking for any sign that she suspected the truth. What I found was worse than suspicion. I found a woman who'd been gaslit into believing her husband's distance was about work pressure, not infidelity. By the end of the evening, I'd planted the seeds of doubt and established myself as a sympathetic ear. More importantly, I confirmed that Megan was innocent in all this, another victim of Theodore's deception. Walking to my car, I felt the weight of what was coming. Soon, for lives would be destroyed, but only 2 people deserved it. The hardest part about justice, I was learning, was accepting that innocent people sometimes got caught in the crossfire. But Theodore and Autumn had made their choice. Now they'd live with the consequences. 3 weeks into my investigation, Detective Cole delivered news that blindsided me completely. We were meeting at a downtown diner, away from prying eyes, when he slid a manila folder across the scratched Formica table. "William, there's something else you need to know. It's not directly related to your wife's affair, but it might complicate things." I opened the folder and felt the world tilt. Inside was a photo of a 19-year-old kid who looked exactly like I had at that age. Same dark hair, same jawline, same green eyes that stared back at me from every mirror. "His name is Michael Franklin," Cole said quietly. "Lives in Milwaukee with his mother, Jennifer Franklin. She never married after you two broke up 20 years ago." Jennifer. The memory hit me like a freight train. We dated during my final year at Northwestern, right before I'd moved to Chicago to start my investment career. She'd been a journalism student, passionate and brilliant, but our relationship had ended when I got an opportunity to work in London for 6 months. By the time I returned, she'd graduated and disappeared. "She tried to contact you once," Cole continued. "Sent a letter to your first investment firm when the boy was 3. Never got a response because you'd already moved to Franklin Capital Management." My hands shook as I studied the surveillance photos. Michael working at a coffee shop near the University of Wisconsin campus. Michael playing pickup basketball with friends. Michael who had my face and didn't know I existed. Does Autumn know? I asked. No evidence of that. But William, there's more. The kid's been asking questions about his father. Jennifer finally told him your name last month. He's been researching you online. I closed the folder, my mind racing. A son. I had a son who'd grown up without me, and I'd been completely oblivious. The guilt was crushing, but underneath it was something else, a fierce protective instinct I'd never experienced. I want to meet him, I said. Are you sure? With everything else going on? I'm sure. Set it up. That evening, I sat in my study, staring at the photos of Michael while Autumn chatted about her day. More lies about clients and meetings. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt something other than anger. I felt hope. Autumn noticed my distraction. You seem distant lately, William. Is everything okay with work? I looked at her, this woman who'd shared my bed for 11 years while planning to destroy our marriage, and made a decision. Everything's fine, honey. Just thinking about the future. She smiled and kissed my forehead, never suspecting that the future no longer included her. The coffee shop in Milwaukee was exactly the kind of place I'd expected a college student to work. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and the constant hum of espresso machines. I arrived 30 minutes early, choosing a corner table where I could watch the door without being obvious. Michael walked in at exactly 2 p.m., just as Cole had predicted. Seeing him in person was like looking through a time machine. He moved with the same confident stride I'd had at his age, the same unconscious way of running his hand through his hair when he was thinking. I waited until his shift started, then approached the counter casually. Large coffee, black. I ordered, studying his face up close. Sure thing, he said, then paused. His eyes narrowed slightly, like he was trying to place me. Do we know each other? You look familiar. I get that a lot, I replied, handing him a 20 for a $5 coffee. Keep the change. For the next hour, I sat at my table, pretending to work on my laptop while watching my son serve customers. He was polite, but not servile, efficient without being rushed. When an elderly customer spilled her drink, he cleaned it up without being asked and brought her a replacement on the house. Character. The kid had character. When his shift ended, I followed him outside at a distance. He walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench, pulling out textbooks. Pre-law, from what I could see. Smart kid. I approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Mind if I sit? All the other benches are taken. He looked up, that same puzzled expression crossing his face. Go ahead. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Michael closed his textbook and turned to face me directly. Okay, this is weird. You were at the coffee shop. Now you're here. Either you're following me, or this is the strangest coincidence ever. I'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times, but now that it was here, all my prepared words seemed inadequate. Michael, my name is William Franklin. I think we need to talk. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale, then flushed red, then pale again. You're him, he whispered. You're my father. Yes, I said simply. I am. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Michael laughed, a bitter sound that cut through me. 20 years, he said. 20 years. And you just show up at my job like it's nothing. I didn't know, Michael. I swear to you, I didn't know you existed until 3 days ago. Michael's anger was raw, understandable, and completely justified. I sat there taking it, letting him vent 20 years of questions and hurt while tourists walked past our park bench, oblivious to the life-changing conversation happening between us. You want to know what's really messed up? Michael said, his voice breaking slightly. I used to make up stories about you. Mom would never tell me anything, so I'd imagine you were some kind of hero, a soldier overseas, or a doctor saving lives, or maybe just a guy who didn't know about me. I didn't know. I repeated. Michael, I swear on everything I am, I didn't know. He studied my face for a long moment. Mom said you were ambitious, said you cared more about money than people. Your mother wasn't wrong, I admitted. I was selfish back then, focused on building my career, making my mark. I thought I had all the time in the world for family later. And now, I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos Detective Cole had taken. Autumn and Theodore entering hotels, kissing in parking lots, living a lie while I built what I thought was our future. Now I'm learning that success means nothing if the people in your life aren't who you think they are. I said, I've spent 11 years married to a woman who's been betraying me for months. But finding out about you, that's not betrayal. That's the best thing that's happened to me in years. Michael stared at the photos, his anger shifting to confusion. Your wife is sleeping with another man, I confirmed. Has been for 8 months. I'm in the middle of planning my revenge, actually. For the first time, Michael almost smiled. Revenge? That doesn't sound very heroic. No, it doesn't. But sometimes being a man means making hard choices. Sometimes it means showing people that actions have consequences. We talked for 2 more hours. Michael told me about growing up without a father, about Jennifer working 2 jobs to put him through school, about his dreams of becoming a lawyer. I told him about my business, my success, and my failures as a human being. I want to be part of your life, I said finally. I know I don't deserve it, and I know it won't be easy, but I want to try. Michael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, What about your wife? What about her? Are you going to destroy her? I looked at this young man, my son, and saw something I'd forgotten existed. Moral clarity, the ability to distinguish between justice and vengeance. I'm going to expose the truth, I said carefully. What happens after that is up to her. Michael nodded slowly. Okay, I want to see how this plays out. But William, if you're going to be my father, you better be the kind of man I can respect. I'll try, I promised. That's all I can do. Then let's start there. The next few weeks became a careful balance between planning my revenge and building a relationship with my son. Michael agreed to come to Chicago for the weekend before the charity gala, giving us time to talk without the pressure of public exposure looming over everything. I put him up at the Palmer House, the same hotel where Autumn and I had been married. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. This place is incredible, Michael said as we sat in the lobby bar. Mom always said you did well for yourself, but seeing it, money isn't everything, I said, then caught myself. Sorry, that probably sounds hollow coming from a guy who just put you up in a $500 a night hotel room. Actually, it sounds like something a father might say. We were making progress, slowly but surely. Michael had his mother's sharp wit and my stubborn streak, a combination that made for interesting conversations. He questioned everything I planned for the gala, forcing me to examine my motives. So you're going to humiliate your wife in front of all these rich people, he said over dinner. And then what? Then she faces the consequences of her choices. And the other guy's wife, Megan? What about her consequences? That question had been bothering me for weeks. Megan Thornfield was innocent in all this, but she'd still be destroyed when the truth came out. Sometimes innocent people get hurt, I said. That's Theodore and Autumn's fault, not mine. Is it though? Michael asked. You have the power to control how this happens. You could confront them privately, give them a chance to come clean, and let them spin the story, make themselves the victims. Michael shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe you give them a chance to do the right thing for once. I'd hired Detective Cole to tail Autumn that evening. She was supposedly at a client meeting, but Cole's text confirmed she was at the Renaissance Hotel with Theodore. Room 412, same as always. Your wife's at the hotel again, Cole texted. They just ordered room service. Looks like a long night. I showed the message to Michael, who read it without expression. You could go there right now, he said. Confront them. End this tonight. I could. But you won't. No, I admitted. I want them to pay publicly. I want everyone who ever respected them to know what kind of people they really are. Michael finished his wine and stood up. Then you better make sure you can live with that choice. Because once you go down this road, there's no taking it back. He was right, of course. In 2 days, I would take my wife's lover's wife to a party, and what happened next would be absolutely brutal for everyone involved. The Chicago Children's Hospital Charity Gala was exactly the kind of event Autumn lived for. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, and enough wealth concentrated in one room to fund a small country. I arrived with Megan Thornfield on my arm, both of us playing our parts perfectly. I can't believe I'm doing this, Megan whispered as we entered the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons. You deserve to know the truth, I replied, adjusting my cufflinks. And they deserve to face the consequences. Megan looked stunning in a midnight blue gown that complemented her silver hair. We'd spent the afternoon rehearsing our story. Old friends who'd reconnected after Theodore and Autumn had been mysteriously absent from recent social events. The moment we walked in, conversation stopped. Whispers followed us across the room like ripples in a pond. I spotted Autumn near the silent auction tables, her face draining of color when she saw us together. Theodore was by the bar, his confident smile faltering as he watched his wife approach me with obvious familiarity. "William," Autumn said, reaching us first. Her voice was steady, but I could see panic in her eyes. "What a surprise to see you here with Megan." "Autumn, darling," I replied, kissing her cheek. "Megan and I ran into each other last week. Since you've been so busy with work lately, I thought she might enjoy having some company tonight." "How thoughtful," Megan said, her voice perfectly innocent. "Autumn, you look lovely. That dress is gorgeous." "Thank you," Autumn managed. "Where's Theodore this evening?" "Business emergency," Megan lied smoothly. "You know how demanding his work can be." I watched Theodore approach from the corner of my eye, his face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. He'd probably been expecting a quiet evening with my unsuspecting wife, not a public confrontation with both spouses present. "William," Theodore said, extending his hand. "Good to see you." "And Megan, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" "William invited me," Megan said, taking his hand but not releasing mine. "Isn't that sweet? Since you've been working such long hours lately, he thought I might enjoy the company." The four of us stood there in a perfect tableau of deception, each playing our assigned roles while the truth hung between us like a loaded gun. Other guests began to notice the tension, conversations turning our way with poorly disguised curiosity. "Perhaps we should find our table," I suggested. "I believe we're all seated together tonight." Autumn's face went white. "Together? Didn't you know?" I smiled. "I purchased a table for 10. Michael will be joining us as well." "Michael?" Theodore asked. "My son," I said, watching both their faces carefully. "Autumn's never mentioned him." "How strange. He's quite excited to meet my wife and her business associates." The evening was about to become absolutely brutal, and they had no idea how deep the devastation would go. Michael arrived fashionably late, looking every inch the confident young man I'd raised him to be in just a few short weeks. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo and carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who belonged in these circles. "Dad," he said, embracing me warmly before turning to the table. "You must be Autumn. I've heard so much about you." Autumn's smile was frozen in place. "Michael, what a lovely surprise." William never mentioned he had a son. 20 years of surprises, Michael replied pointedly. "But we're making up for lost time now." The dinner proceeded with excruciating politeness, each course accompanied by increasingly strained conversation. Theodore kept checking his phone, probably hoping for some business emergency that would give him an excuse to leave. Autumn barely touched her food, her eyes darting between Michael and me like she was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Then came dessert, and with it my moment. I stood up, tapping my champagne glass with a silver spoon. The sound carried across the ballroom, drawing attention from the 300 guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. "I'd like to make a toast." Autumn's hand gripped her napkin so tightly her knuckles went white. Theodore half rose from his chair, then sat back down when he realized there was nowhere to run. "To truth," I began, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the room's projection system. "To loyalty, and to the consequences of betrayal." The first photo appeared on the massive screen behind me. Autumn and Theodore entering the Renaissance Hotel. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The second showed them kissing passionately in the parking garage. The third captured them in Theodore's office, her dress disheveled, his hands in places they had no right to be. "For 8 months," I continued, my voice steady despite the chaos erupting around us, "these two people have been conducting an affair behind the backs of their spouses. They've lied, cheated, and stolen precious time from the people who trusted them most." Autumn was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Theodore looked like he was going to be sick. Around us, Chicago's social elite watched in horrified fascination as 2 of their own were publicly destroyed. "Theodore Thornfield has also been embezzling from his investors," I announced, displaying financial documents on the screen. "Meridian Holdings is bankrupt, propped up by illegal loans and hidden debts. While he's been playing the role of successful businessman, he's been stealing from everyone who trusted him." Security appeared at the edges of the room, Not hotel security, but federal agents. Detective Cole had coordinated everything perfectly. Megan stood up beside me, her voice clear and strong. I'm filing for divorce, she announced. And I'm pressing charges for theft, fraud, and emotional distress. As am I added, looking directly at Autumn. Our marriage is over. The papers will be served tomorrow morning. Theodore tried to stand, tried to say something, but Michael was there, blocking his path. My son looked him straight in the eye and said, "Sit down. Face what you've done like a man." The federal agents moved in then, handcuffs glinting under the chandeliers. Theodore Thornfield was led away in front of 300 witnesses, his empire crumbling with every step. Autumn looked at me with tears and desperation. "William, please. We can fix this." "No," I said quietly. "We can't. But maybe you can learn to be a better person. For your sake, I hope you do." 6 months later, I stood in the same hotel, but this time for Michael's law school graduation party. He'd transferred to Northwestern to be closer to me, and we'd spent every weekend building the relationship we should have had all along. Autumn was working as a hotel event coordinator in Milwaukee, starting over with nothing but the clothes on her back. Theodore was serving 15 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. Megan had moved to San Francisco and started a new life with the settlement money. "Any regrets?" Michael asked, adjusting his new law school ring. I looked around the room, at the family I'd found, the justice I'd served, the truth I'd finally told. "None whatsoever," I said. "Sometimes being a man means making the hard choices. Sometimes it means showing people that actions have consequences. And sometimes," Michael added with a smile, "it means knowing when to stop and start building something better." He was right. As usual, the revenge was over. Now came the harder task, being the father I should have been all along.